We left off last video getting the initial foundation for our collection view up and running. Now in this video, we're going to start working on our flow layout. Well, real quick, what a flow layout is it kind of determines basically how your collection view looks. For example, we're going to go with a 3-column look that you see here, this 3-column grid. So we're going to configure our own collection view flow layout to give us this look. There's a little bit of basic math involved, but the collection view flow layout isn't too bad, and hopefully you'll see that once we get the code up and running. So first things first, let's create our function that is going to give us the flow layout here. So func create 3-column flow layout. We're being very specific with our naming here. That is going to return a UICollectionView FlowLayout, because what we're going to do is once we have this all laid out, we're going to replace, let's do this right now. Replace that with create 3-column flow layout. And it's going to give us an error saying like I didn't return anything yet. So return, again, just temporarily, UICollectionView flow layout, and initialize that. So right now that's returning the default flow layout that we had in there, but we're not going to do that. So looking at our collection view, you can see we want 3 columns. So logically you may think, okay, we're going to take the width of the view and divide that by 3. And that's how big our cells are going to be. And that is the general idea we're going for, but this is where the basic math comes in, because there's also, again, like looking at this collection view, we have insets on the left and the right of the screen, because we don't want the cells pushed all the way up against the screen. We want a little bit of padding there to let it breathe a little bit. And then also there's minimum spacing in between each cell. I mean, you can set that to whatever you want, but you'll see that there's math, right? If we just divide by 3, it's not going to fit because we're not accounting for that padding and we're not accounting for that minimum spacing in between. So that's where the math comes into play. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to take the full width of the view, and then we're going to subtract out the padding on the left and the right, and then we're going to subtract out the minimum spacing in between the 3 columns. That will give us like our total available width, and then we're going to divide that total available width by 3 to get the nice 3 equal columns. So that is a big picture what we're going to do. Let's code it up. So first things first, say let width, remember we want the overall width, that's what we're going to start with. I know we're going to have to line these up, equal view.bounds.width. Remember the view is the view that's on the view controller. So that's the total width of the screen, whether that's an iPhone 5 screen or an iPhone 11 Pro Max screen, that's the width. Let's create a padding. So what this is going to be is the padding. It's actually the UI edge insets that we're going to use, but we're just creating a variable for that real quick in a CG float. And we put a space there, equals and equals. And the padding I'm going to use around all the edges on the left, right, top, bottom is going to be 12. Let minimum item spacing, and that is also a CG float. Boy, I really misjudged my equal signs. Line those up. I'm not using the shortcuts either, right? If you hold down Option, you can give you multi-cursors, and then you can just tab like that and delete like that. I don't know. It's my keyboard shortcut game isn't on point when I'm trying to like teach and everything too. My mind's elsewhere. So we're going to make that a 10 for now. And you'll see where this comes into play once this all comes in. Basically, we're giving ourselves all these variables so we can do our math. So if you remember, I said we're trying to come up with our total available width. And again, that is the width of the whole screen that we have here. We want to subtract out our padding on the left and right. So we're going to have to multiply padding by 2. And then we want to also subtract out the minimum item spacing in between each to get our width of each cell. So now let's actually compute our available width. Let available width is going to equal, now it's going to equal width minus, and then this is where the very basic math in. I mean, we're talking basis subtraction and order of operations. So now we want to subtract out padding times 2. And the reason it's times 2 is because we're going to have this padding on the left of the screen and the right of the screen, like you see here. And then we also, once that's done, we want to subtract out the minimum item spacing in between. So now we're going to also subtract out minimum item spacing times 2. And the reason I'm kind of doing these in variables and not just like doing the math in my head, because it's basic math, right? 10 times 2. It's basic math, but you want to put these in variables because, like, I don't know, maybe in your design, you want the minimum item spacing to all of a sudden be 5. Now you just change it there and everything adjusts. You don't have to like go through and change everything. Same thing with the padding. If you ever want to tweak the padding, you just tweak it here. All the math still works. You're good to go. So again, what this available width is giving us is the full width of the screen. We're subtracting out the padding on either side of the screen, the left and the right. And then there's only 2 minimum item spacings, right? Because if you have the 3 columns, There's in between the left and the middle, and then in between the middle and the right, right? Those are the only two, middle spaces you got to take out. So that's why we're taking out minimum item spacing times 2. And this can work, again, right, if you had a different number of columns, obviously that number is going to be different, but that's why we specifically said, hey, we're creating a 3-column flow layout. You could make this flexible enough to take in any amount of columns, unnecessary for what we're doing. And then lastly, now that we've done our math, we want our actual item width. And our item width is going to be the actual cells. That's what we did all that for, is determine how wide our cells are going to be. And remember, like I said earlier, the width of the cell is going to be different depending on how big the screen is. Remember, we talked about the iPhone 5 width versus the iPhone Pro Max width. Vastly different. So that's why we want to adapt to that. And this is going to be very flexible for all screen sizes. So let item width, and that is going to equal available width divided by 3, right? Remember, like I said at the beginning, in a perfect world, it'd be nice if we just did the view divided by 3, but we got all this padding and minimum spacing to deal with. So that's why we had to do this little bit of very basic math. And now that we've figured out all the values, now it's a matter of like putting those values into play. So let's create our layout. Let FlowLayout equal UICollectionView FlowLayout, and the initializer is going to be just blank. And now we're going to start configuring it. FlowLayout dot, remember I said we're going to do the insets section inset, and that's going to be UI edge insets, and then you see we can get the top left, bottom right. Again, this is like the padding all around. And you see we have the padding up here, so we're just going to copy that and then paste in padding, paste in padding, paste in padding, paste in padding. Seems redundant, but I'm sure you could write a wrapper around that to make that more convenient, or an extension on UI edge insets. If you wanted to do that, I'm fine with this for now. Like if I was using this a lot, I would probably do that, but only using it here. So now we want to do FlowLayout.item size equals CG size, and do the initializer. And you want to give it a width and a height, and it's going to be a CG float. CG float because, again, like padding, CG float, all this UI stuff typically deals with CG floats. So the width is going to be our item width that we took all that time to calculate our item width. That's what we want the item width to do. And again, backing up big picture, the flow layout basically, like you see, you put in the padding, you put in how big your items are, basically determines the flow of the collection view. Now the height, right? So we have our width, cool. However, our height, right, because we have to deal with the square avatar image, and then there's space at the bottom for the label. So what we're going to do in order to make this dynamic, right, you could put in like 150, and that'll probably work, right? But it's going to be 150 whether it's on an iPhone 5 or an iPhone Pro Max. So you don't really want to hard code that, even though it would work. It would look a little different on each screen. In order to make it look the same, we want to do item width. So basically we're going to say this is going to be a square right now. However, that's not really going to work with our current layout because, right, we have the avatar and then the label at the bottom. So it needs to be a little bit, rectangular, like higher. It needs to be more height than width. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little plus 40 here. And what that plus 40 does is it buys us a little extra space for our label. Remember, our label is like 20 points high, and it just gives us some extra padding. I think you could probably do like 35, and that could still work. Like you're just really dialing it in there. But essentially what that gives us is basically kind of like a vertical little rectangle that's just slightly taller than it is wide. Again, just to give us enough space for that label. And that is going to be our cell size. So now we don't want to return the default one. We want to return the flow layout that we just created here on line 51. So now going back up to our configure collection view, now when we pass in the flow layout, we're passing in create 3-column flow layout, and then that is down here, which creates that flow layout. Now, back to, we're going to do this in another video, but for now, hopefully, I'm hoping like red lights went off right here, because you're looking at this, and this is a way that kind of always like triggers my spidey senses, if you will, right? Anytime I see nothing but white and blue, right? Because basically what the color codes, and you may have a different theme in your X code, so the colors may be different, but you know what I'm talking about. So like anything that's green like this means it's like a variable on the follower list VC, or it's a function on the follower list VC. When you see the things in blue, like that's not something custom like that I wrote, right? Or that's not directly related to the view controller. So all this, basically what I'm trying to say is like this can be refactored out into like another function. So you would just call that function here, kind of like a spoiler alert, it's going to be a file called UI helpers. I usually create one of those for little stuff like this. So it'll be like UI helper.create 3-column flow layout, and all this code will be out here. We're going to do that in another video, but I'm hoping again, the red lights went off because back to the whole, like, does my view controller need to know about this? And no, the view controller does not need to know about all the customization of your flow layout. And again, what always kind of triggers my alarms are if I just see blue and white and maybe red for strings. Basically, if I see no green, if I see no green, I know I can probably refactor it out. Again, not an absolute rule, but most of the time that will be true. So that is our flow layout set up. Again, we can't quite see the fruits of our labor just yet because we don't have the data source set up, right? The data source is what tells the collection view what to show. So right now, if we ran it, we're still gonna see the old pink collection view that we saw in the last video. Again, just to verify that. Get followers, cool. Because again, like I said, it doesn't know what to show yet. So we're doing this piece by piece. In the next video, we're going to actually implement the new hotness in iOS 13 diffable data source that will actually fill in our collection view. And by the end of the next video, you should be able to see our collection view up and running. And then, like I said, we'll come back and clean up all the sawdust on this screen and make this screen actually like good code. So see you in the next video.